I was not ready, actually. I said that. Okay. Hi, welcome. I'm Kimberly from the Country Bookshop, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Country Bookshop before I introduce Mike and we jump into our conversation about sharing in the groove. The Country Bookshop was founded in 1953 and is in Southern Pines, North Carolina. I've been here since 2010 when the Pilot newspaper bought the store. You can order autographed copies of Sharing in the Groove, the book that we'll be chatting about today, through the link in the chat and also underneath here if you're joining us in the future. I want to thank you for shopping with us, listening to or watching this conversation, sharing our conversations, and buying this book or other books from us. It is because you shop with us that we are able to bring you conversations like this one, highlight books that we think are interesting and important, bring authors to our town, and continue to participate in the fantastic small town life that we have. If you have not heard of Southern Pines, you should come visit. We are 10 minutes away from the golf resort Pinehurst, an hour away from Raleigh, but we have a truly great live local music scene, and the bookshop is one of many independent stores that line our historic downtown street. That includes the Sunrise Theater and an incredible First Friday for people listening to this, founded by people who migrated to Southern Pines 15 or so years ago, having kids and couldn't follow bands like they wanted to. Our First Friday hosts for free acts on the cusp of breaking in, like Daniel Donato, Fireside Collective, and like just so many others. So please come check it out. When you're here, come to the bookshop for our author events, for which we have so many incredible people like Tom Maxwell, Amar Tolles, Lily King, or James Patterson. If you are curious about our town, please come visit us. Dave Schools is quoted in the end of Sharing the Groove book talking about Athens, but it really rang true about Southern Pines. It is never the structure of the town. It has nothing to do with the city council, although I will interject to say that our mayor is a woman who also owns our guitar shop, Casino Guitars, that is actually one of the top independent guitar shops in the country and kind of famous for their YouTube channel. But Schools says about Athens, it has everything to do with the people that choose to stay there. And he goes on to say, this town is amazing because of the people who live here. So I hope you come. I hope you buy your books while you're here and continue to make it possible for so many of us to stay in this thriving and creative small town. I'm great, even though Mike could not visit with us. I'm grateful that you are taking the time today, the day after your book's birthday, to speak with us about Sharing in the Groove, the untold story of the 90s jam band explosion and the scene that followed. You'll have to hear your bio yet again, and then we can just start our conversation. Mike Ayers is a seasoned music and culture journalist with work published in Billboard, The Wall Street Journal, Rolling Stone, Time Magazine, Rutgers, Uprocks, and Relix. His first book, One Last Song, Conversations on Life, Death, and Music, was published in 2020 and picked as one of Variety's best music books of the year. The wild, untold history of the unlikely rise of Fish, Dave Matthews, Widespread Panic, Blues Traveler, and numerous other bands that helped define the 1990s jam band scene. Sharing in the Groove is the untold oral history behind that and a scene that paved the way for modern day cultural institutions such as Bonnaroo, as well as kept the Grateful Dead ethos alive. It is a scene with its own values and its own unique interactions with fame, record labels, MTV, drugs, and success. As a veteran music journalist, Mike Ayers has been to more than 130 Fish shows, 20 Dead shows, and countless others by the bands profiled in this book. In the mid-90s, he stumbled upon a job working backstage for Fish as a prep cook in exchange for all-access passes for the night's show, and ended up doing this for years. Later in the decade, he dabbled in the taping scene and recorded numerous shows that are still circulated online today. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. That was great. What a great intro.
uh,
Yeah. And I will say Daniel Donato, who you were speaking about, playing in Southern Pines, he's
for
fantastic
free.
for free. So it seems like y'all definitely know what's up.
It's a really special place.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, as I've been talking with customers, trying to get everybody excited about your book, people also are kind of interested in your story. And I'm wondering if you can start there with your music story, but also kind of take it in to my first question, which is what did the pitch for this book look like? And kind of what was your vision for this book in the beginning?
Yeah, kind of simple, to be honest. I noticed that this scene was still very, very active. The bands that I talk about in the book are still very active today. I saw Fish last night for the umpteenth time, and here in Queens, New York. And 14,000 people were there hanging on every single note, right? So and that's not just indicative of them. It's a lot of acts. They still have that following. There's a new crop as well. So I started to think about my time in the 90s, and there's several other oral histories that I read over the years that I really loved. Uh, Meet Me in the Bathroom, Please Kill Me, classic around the punk rock movement. There's been a bunch around great TV shows, and I just thought that I would like to I'd like to read something like this, and I'd like to read something like this in that format. And I should do that. I should just make the thing I want to read. No one else is doing it right now, so that was it.
Nice. So when you pitched for it, how did that process go? So it was always going to be kind of a compilation, a well organized compilation of all these interviews
Yeah.
from the
So
beginning, or like
yeah, yes. So the oral history format is very popular. The very big book Daisy Jones and the Six.
I'm familiar. Taylor Jenkins Reid actually came to town, and I interviewed her at the Sunrise Theater, right next to where all we have on the stage slash right next to the outdoor stage where we have all the great music.
That's great. Well, so I read a interview with her after I read that book, and she was talking about this and was like, "Yeah, I just got the idea because my husband is always reading these oral histories about music. So I just thought, why don't I just try to do it in a fiction format?" Around a band. And, it's essentially like Fleetwood Mac, which is who doesn't love that? And, readers like this format. So, and I like this format. It is, hearing it straight from the people that lived it versus me articulating a story about places and times that I was at, but I was at the periphery, right? I was there as a fan. I was not dealing with record labels, right? And trying to make it, on radio or not, like having to have those like decisions and conversations. So people, people like that fly on the wall. Some people have been uh referring to it as like a documentary like approach, and I think that's accurate. The goal is with these books, at least for me, is you need to tell a really tight arc in each chapter about what the chapter's about through these people, through my interviews, right? And then hopefully that is also telling a bigger arc from the beginning to the end as well. So, readers can hopefully get a portrait of not only what life was like back then for these musicians starting what I think is a very DIY culture, music scene, the trials and tribulations that they went through, but how over the course of 10, 15 years, the musicians that are in this book really had a really profound impact on American music culture, um, eh, tons of people's lives, and I think that's a great thing. So hopefully people get that.
It felt like creating a permanent record of documentation, like an original source material of like archival documentation is what it
Yeah.
reads like to me, and what it feels like to me is just, you know, there's no because when I first came to the book so early in the book, and I was so pumped that something was coming out about this culture, um, I didn't realize it was an oral history. It was just like it. I thought it was going to be your these interviews and your commentary, and then when I got into the book, really prepping for this conversation, I was, I think there's an asset to just this documentary record that is not that kind of takes out the commentary and kind of stands for the future. But I was so do you think that the origin stories of this movement had not been documented well before or had not been part of the record, or how do you think that the story of these origins have been held up until now? You mentioned those books earlier, but
Yeah, yeah. I would say that something in like a format how it exists now that I did, I would say it's not all in one place. Now, it's not to say that in the 90s, in the 2000s, last decade, that it hasn't been covered and there hasn't been things done on it. Like there's a big chapter on the rise of this club in New York and how influential it was called the Wetlands. But a film documentary was done around 15 years ago on the wetlands, right? But it was just that microcosm of that. And so I was trying to, you know, put this club in this instance into a into the broader landscape of what was going on at the time, and then how it paved the way down the road for up and coming acts. Um, So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question directly, but it's there certainly was coverage, but you were mentioning Dave Schools at the beginning. He gives this quote that I love in the book, and he really believes that they, this scene and like a band like Widespread Panic was, quote, the alternative to the alternatives. So, with that meaning, like, when Widespread Panic was getting started, like college rock, college radio rock was really the big thing on campus. Tie dyes and long hair and playing windy music that was influenced by Neil Young and Crosby, Stills and Nash or the Grateful Dead or any of those acts was not like the hot thing, REM in Athens, B-52s in Athens, like that was the hot thing. New Order, that sort of vibe. So when he says we were the alternative to the alternatives, uh it's saying that, but it's also saying that, they in some ways the music industry and the radio didn't really know what to do with their music, but they did know that there were a ton of fans very invested in it. So for them it was like, okay, we have these artists that have a ton of fans. Every artist wants a ton of fans, and that's our job. Our job is to now know how to blow things up like this. And they did in some instances, but some they couldn't. But most of these artists though were very, they always held their ground. Another good story in the book is about how Capricorn Records approached Widespread Panic early on and was like, "Hey, you need to play this song like every night, okay? It's what we're pushing the radio stations to play. So, if people hear it on the radio and go see you, they need to hear that song. Like that's what they want to hear." And they were like, "We're not doing that. Like that's crazy. One, our fans don't want us to play the same thing every night. And two, that sounds super boring. We would not want to do that every night." So they were good at putting their foot down for their beliefs and what they knew that their their fan base really appreciated. There's something to be said about that.
It's interesting too because I forget. I mean, I know, but I forgot until going through this documentary archive how uncool it was. Like legitimately, people didn't understand it. It was uncool. But talking about the management style, and you do a lot about David and Bill Graham, but continuing with the Panic Line, and you have some great interviews with Buck Williams. Can you talk a little bit about how his management style differed from some of the other managers that you interviewed and from some of the other experiences, just his take on radio and how they dealt with radio, for example?
Yeah, I mean, look, the like managers had to walk a very careful tightrope. Okay. They had to make sure that what everything was being done was in the best interest of the artist. And I remember Buck saying like just because a radio station was saying come play our thing, we'll play you more. They had to question, was that the best approach for the band? Is that going to be the best way to get their music out there? And in some instances, it was no. In some instances, it was yes. But I think all of them were very skilled in what they did. Some of the managers that I spoke to in the book, that they just fell into this job. They never had any uh musical music industry background in their families, and they loved to act. They wanted to be involved. They saw an opportunity to help, and in this way, and they learned through osmosis. They learned through trial and error. But they made things happen, and they were super instrumental in blowing up these bands. And like real quick, and I think the thing that is like the thread between all of them is they, like the artists themselves, they understood the culture.
Well, let's talk about the community a little bit and go back to the wetlands because there's so much like going through and seeing the way you've organized it and seeing this zoomed out thing. There's certain things that stood out to me. It's just the structure of the wetlands where there were set breaks where everybody interacted with the audience, and as you kind of go through really chronicling how festivals began, with like the Clifford Ball, and you had, you had everybody on their golf carts, and even just going down to Jamaica and like everybody on the plane together, or all the ski shows, and where from the get go, people rose out of the community to professionals at it. But can you talk a little bit of, continue talking about that a little bit more?
Yeah, it was a really fascinating aspect that emerged through the numerous interviews that I was doing, that there was this very like punk rock DIY mentality around things, where it was like, you know, we're just gonna we're just gonna do it. Like,
Yeah.
just print up some flyers and hand them out. Like, just tell people about it. Like, do what you can. Go on the early days of the internet. Let people tape your shows um and spread them free of charge. Like all of these sorts of things were antithetical to what was happening in the music industry, right? Like it was like, oh, well, X big artist is being, you know, marketed by the label to have these street teams, right? Like street teams were a thing in the 90s, whereas like labels would send college kids or whoever was into it just stuff to hand out. Well, they saw it like, oh, we could do that. We don't have a record label. We don't have that, but we do have Kinkos. We do have like really basic design skills on Word. So yeah, we'll just do that.
You have
Um,
scissors,
we have
copy.
scissors, yeah, like who's stopping us? Um, there is this there's this funny story in there about this band, the Disco Biscuits, and how when they were getting off um in like 95, 96, they would go to fish parking lots and just hand out flyers just to every single person. And so much so that they would stick around, and when people would come out of the show, they just had tons of people being like, "Yeah, I got it, Disco Biscuits. I got the flyer. Like, no need." Like it was just like this aggressive mentality. Ride or die. We believe so much in what we're doing, and we're really going to make a go at it. Um, and we can do it. We can do it.
I loved that because I also like, and for people listening to this who might not be wanting to buy a hardcover book from the Country Bookshop where we have autographed book plates, you remember all these things you forgot, like the flyers on your car that had got, and that was part of the beauty of it. And the little anecdotal stories, one that got me was everybody like handing them out at some big show, these green flyers, and all that, like, take this and pass it down the row and greening the whole stadium. But part of the taper community in your bio, you talked about how you were taping. Can we talk about that and then like the tapers kind of leading one community to another, um, which I thought, which I loved, just that storyline of, or just that aspect of the origin story about how these communities evolve when you had like leftover time on a tape. Can you
Yeah,
talk?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it grew out of the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead were very pro taping from their fans. They knew that that was a huge method if fans wanted to distribute their live shows and they didn't have to do anything after they played the music. Um, but people really wanted to hear it. Like what could be wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Like why would you stop that? And they didn't. It was just the opposite. They were very encouraging for it. They had sections at their shows for a long time that was dedicated, like little roped off sections for tapers to bring their stuff, and you had to get a certain ticket for tapers. Fish started doing that as well because they were starting to notice the same thing. And, look, when you don't play the same show or the same song over and over, and everything becomes different, and some things become like word of mouth fire, and the people in the culture, me, whoever, you just want to like tell people about something that you love, that you think other people are going to love, like-minded people. That is, as that concept is not a new concept, right? Like people have been doing that for centuries, but it's just it became a way of like connecting with people, and sharing the music freely, and getting things sent to you freely, and learning about new acts. You were talking about at the end of a tape, sorry, a 90-minute tape, maybe there's 60 minutes of music in one set or something. And so people would always get creative by filling up the end of that second side B, with things that they loved, that they wanted other people to hear. And so if somebody else dubbed that tape, they kind of started this like chain of, oh, there's this band, the Disco Biscuits, and here's three songs from this night that um, Mike thinks that I should, I would be into. And, I'm not going to be into everything, but, there's a good chance that if if I'm recommending something through this, through this exchange, um, it means something. And it means something too that, I would take time, these tapers would take time not only to tape at shows, but then dub them at their house, put them in a mailer, take them down to the post office, stand in line, mail them out. Like all of that stuff is like it's like this quiet care that got put into spreading this music. It's very cool. Now we
I
can
love
down
Riot
now we can
Care.
download everything. And there's a great app called nugs.net that is essentially the Spotify for the live music community, and they stream tons of stuff. So you don't necessarily need to do what I was describing anymore. It's certainly a sign, it's certainly like an embedded practice in the 80s and 90s and a little bit of the 2000s when CDs came, when they were able to be burned. But I don't know.
It's still a
It's great.
currency. It's still a
It's
currency.
it's still a currency, sure. Um, it is. I mean, I was having a slight debate with somebody the other day, and how if you or if I recommend something to you face to face, like right now, like we're having this conversation, even though it's on a computer, you might write it down and be like, "Oh, I'll check that out later today."
I legitimately
That's
dropped Fireside Collective in the intro.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But like when there's like a random, Instagram person that you've never met that is just talking about things, you might be like, "Oh, well, I trust their taste. This is great." But I don't know. I just think like that human connection that people have and can talk about and experience music together, and that still goes an extremely long way. It's just changed a little.
I mean, it's something we talk about all the time in the book world because why in the world would you ever walk into a bookstore when you can get it faster and cheaper online? And it's for that conversation, it's for that book recommendation, it's for that alchemy that happens. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I heard somebody at a bookstore the other night, and it was a person, and she went up to the bookseller and was like, "Okay, so I'm going to the beach, and I need a beach read, but I don't want it to be a typical beach read. I want it to be like," and she listed off a few authors. I think Taffy Ackner was one of them. Like she really liked Fleischman is in Trouble, and you could see the woman and like the bookseller was like, yes, I- yes, I
yeah,
got it. And just like it was like a 3-second conversation because she's like, follow me, like just like that. And yeah, that's
the
there's
most fun ever, actually.
it is fun, but also it's like, you know, algorithms are going to recommend you things that they think you'll like all the time. But you know and you could probably type that AI thing, like that question into Amazon's AI. I don't even know if it exists, but it probably does, and it'll spit out some things. But you know this person getting this other person, even though it's like a very small sliver of that day, goes a long way.
Well, I mean, it's not unlike the story of the human connectivity constantly overpowering whatever technology, whatever structure is in play. Like your whole book's about that, about how there are a couple people in the industry who overpowered whatever the industry understanding was. And I have like all these questions, where the community thing, then I want to talk about like musicianship and the energy, but and then the art scene, and then but one of the things that, since we talked about AI, like, well, actually, let's not go out of order. I can do this all the time. Let's go back to one of the things that I'm so excited about, what your book acknowledges, which is the frat houses and prep schools communities at that particular juncture in time and what that did for the bands. And I think that's something that people are aware of, but I'm not sure it's something that's ever been documented, like in the permanent record that I think you've done. Can you mention that a little?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it was well known at all. I mean, I honestly like I might have known it a little bit back then, but yeah, it was very surprising that frats and prep schools were so hip to book a lot of these bands in the early days. Um and they wanted they wanted some live entertainment for people to come to frat parties. And they had budgets. They had, so if you could go to Ithaca, New York, or somewhere around Athens to a frat and get a $5,000 to $10,000 payday to play like a party in a field for one night, that's a massive paycheck for you that can make it so you don't have to sweat about booking a club gig 7 nights out of the week, right? And so that's what they would do, and that's what they learned, that the pay could be could be better, way better. So why not
Well,
mix that in with the clubs we were playing?
and I think it's just so nice to be documented because as someone who grew up in that, like we were always so hyper aware of music and our access to it, but also one of the things that no one mentions, but also like it's a natural diaspora because you're all in one place, and then everybody go, 2 years later, you physically move yourself to Chicago or Texas or wherever you go after school, and you take your music tastes with you, and it's a natural like feeder. Um,
100%. Yeah, it's like this moment in time that seems like it is going to last forever, and it's just like so long and infinite, but actually it's not at all. And if, you grow up to, be 50, 60, 70, that moment of your life was really just 4 years. So it is a sliver of time. But like you said, you take music with you. I do think like when you're in your teens and early 20s, it's a very big coming of age moment for most people. And you're talking about this college experience, and the sounds and the music and the atmospheres around you plays a massive part in who you become and who you still are, because we're all evolving, but there's always nods to the past in our life. And you know uh music is certainly one of them,
yeah, and I
and
think
the
you're
songs we love.
yeah, yeah. Um, you know, Derek Trucks talks about regionality more so than anybody else you interview, and he talks about I'm gonna plop a few things in here, and then I'm wondering. So like he talks about you have the Georgia clubs, and then you go up to New York, and you're like, oh, that's the wetland, the other version. Then you talk about what's happening in Georgia, and a little bit about North Carolina with like Meatloaf. There's one Cat's Cradle reference, and you talk a little bit about Mammoth and just and John Moore talking about just how hard Southern bands had to work. You just toured forever. You didn't just like get signed off a demo. But I know you had to be kind of cutthroat with your interviews. Leave it, there's only so many pages you can print. But I'm wondering, because regionality's always been a part of my understanding of the larger band culture and fans and how people understand music. And I'm wondering if you have any commentary on that, or if there are parts of your interviews that spoke to that more and were left on the floor, or if I'm just that's just my understanding that is unique to me.
No, I don't think it's unique to you. I mean, there's certainly stories of of music scenes sprouting up in different locales. I mean, famously from the same era as, grunge in Seattle, right? Memphis has been a hotbed, New Orleans has been a hotbed for decades, right? Um, but what was interesting about this is that there were all these scenes that were kind of happening at the same time, like very undergroundy, Athens and Burlington and New York and Boulder and Colorado. Um, and they all kind of had the same mentality around performing and around uh the taping and just how they wanted to treat their careers. And in the early days, Fish and Widespread Panic, they both realized we need to get out of these regions, right? Not because they're bad, but because we have worked them for a bit, and that's great, but we need to start spreading out. So they actually connected and teamed up where it was like, hey, you have a bunch of fans in the South, and we have a bunch of fans in the North. Why don't we do a joint tour where in the North you guys open for us and we'll expose you to new fans, and in the South we'll open for you all, and we'll get exposed to new fans, and we'll see how it goes. So it's like it's that sort of thinking that you know region is region is important, um but it's just kind of like smartly or set like just being savvy about you know bonding or like joining forces. You mentioned the Cat's Cradle. The Cat's Cradle was very instrumental to this scene. There's a lot of clubs, Ziggy's in Winston-Salem. I went to a bunch in the 90s. They were, Asheville as well. They were very um pro pro this scene. Cat's Cradle had a lot of like indie acts come through as well, but they would also have be a home for these more jammy acts that were going up and down the East Coast. So you could book like a run of like Athens or Atlanta, Athens, um, and then instead of scooting up to DC, you could then go to Cat's Cradle, you could go to Richmond, and then you could go to DC, and then you could go to Philly, New York, right?
And hit all the colleges along and boarding schools
And you
along
hit
the
all
way.
the colleges. You hit all the colleges. People have free time, more so maybe. And yeah, so you're theoretically also like, you know, popping up in these places that uh we're going to be hip to.
Uh, let's talk about the musicianship, because and one of the things that was interesting, it's all improv, everything else, but early in the book, somebody from the Spin Doctors talks about like jazz ethics, which I was like, oh my God, what are jazz ethics? Like, this is awesome. And looking it up, and it was, you know, AI does a little AI overview from the entire internet, but it was basically everything, like my complete understanding of jam music. Can you talk about the musicianship, the jazz ethics, the dedication to practice, the just the skills?
Yeah, they all of these acts in this book from this era, they had such a dedication to practice and to the craft. They loved making studio records. Um, they grew up on studio records. They loved making songs you hear on a record or a CD at the time, but ultimately they were very, very, very focused and very disciplined around practicing their craft before they would play. So you had acts that would practice all the time, and then they would be on the road 200 days out of the year, and so they'd be playing all the time. And if you do that, like if you are doing that, you're going to get very, very good. And if you also, in theory though, it's not a boring thing because you're not playing the same thing over and over and over again. They don't want to do that. They know their fans don't want to do that. So that's a plus. Um, some of them have jazz trainings, jazz backgrounds. So, in terms of the styles that they play and the way that they implore listening when they're on stage and when they're listening to their bandmates, it's a very like it requires you to be very unselfish, right? It's very interesting. Because you can't be super selfish and make a collective thing be fantastic, right? You can occasionally, like all these people, all these bands, yes, solos are certainly a thing. Like, but ultimately it's this very disciplined listening that I think they take from the jazz worlds, and they all listen to all of that too. So they weren't necessarily just listening to rock bands, like they were listening and studying to, like jazz masters uh at the same time they were looking at the Beatles or, whoever.
Well, one of the things that really struck me, and it's like the bridge in between jazz and in the jam scene, is really the performance art. And in part, like this incredible book by David Sheff just came out in April, called Yoko. It's a biography, and like, her romance is like kind of a subplot, but it just like goes through her and her work as a performance artist. And you did your interviews and the way you cobbled them together did such a good job, I think, of talking about Colonel Bruce, and especially just talking about how musicians came around him, around the performance art. And then I think in part, because I was looking for it, I just saw in so many different drops of conversation, everybody mentioning the art scene, like from Dave to Ray Swartz, from Mo, like it just, the art scene where these things emerged were there. And I loved the story that Otel says about like the end of the night, there were two people there, and it was two SNL people because they got it. They got the art of it. And it was
Mm.
I feel like this is me interjecting my opinion, which I can only do appropriately in the form of a question. But I think that's really important as we're understanding the movement of this as an art movement. But anyway, fast forward to today, and I know you're a fish person, but one of the things that, because I'm not necessarily a fish person, but I really admire watching them from afar, is their performance and the art that they are bringing to their performance, and how they're constantly outdoing themselves. And we're having this conversation in the days of the sphere and like what's happening now with performance art. I think and I'm wondering if you could, this is taking it out of the book, but really taking it into today. Can you talk about, I have an official question, whatever, how these artists are responding to technology today and taking performance art to today.
Yeah, I think they're using technology when it makes sense. I mean, the light shows at these shows these days are, I mean, they always were incredible, but now they're like even more incredible. And when it makes sense, I think they certainly will embrace that sort of stuff. Fish was the second artist to play at the Sphere. And most art, like every artist does these residencies where um it's like weeks or months, right? You two played there for like 5 months. Dead and Company has done a few things that are like they're just very long. Fish was the second artist that played there,
4 days.
and they did 4 days. That's it. They were not going to do anything but 4 days. They did not, uh this is not uncommon for them, but those 4 days, not one song was repeated, and they had exact visuals for each single song. And then it 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 emerged at the end of the run, at the end of the 4 nights, that each night had a very specific theme around the set list and around the visuals related to a sphere or like Earth. And so one night was like water, right? And they played this song that they never play as like a standalone piece of music. And for the first time, this instrumental called I Am Hydrogen showed up. And it showed up because it has to do with water, right? I mean, stuff like that, like, is fantastic. It like who does that? But also, it just goes back to your question about technology. It's like when it makes sense, and can we deliver something that uh is not, I don't know, dumb, like there's just like a money grab, like it has to have like some meaning for us, like decades on into our career. I mean, I saw them, I think 2 years prior to that, and at Madison Square Garden, and uh they had a water theme that night too for some, I think it was Earth Day, and that's why they picked it. Um and they had this massive whale come out or dolphins, maybe both, and fly around the garden like it was like a drone, but they were massive. So it looked like you were like kind of like underwater, and like the theme on the stage like had this like choral situation happening. So like, yeah, like that's using to me that's like, oh, you're using drone technology for the better, right?
You're making
Um,
art. You're
you're
making
making art.
performance art. It is the
It's
next.
cool.
It is super cool and
Yeah.
innovative and pushing the boundaries of. And I think what's interesting to me, a couple things about this, and is that in this age of AI, in this moment in time that we live in, I think it's even more important that you have these really practiced people in creating energy in a space that I don't even think we have words for this. And I think it's really important. I'm talking with writers all the time. I know you're in the music world, but I always, not always, with people who I think could get this and think about this, challenging people to name these things and experiences and what's happening in some of these spaces that AI could never do, that AI can never participate in, AI can never create. You know, this this moment of the conversation is going off the rails because there aren't good words to describe a vibe or something like that. We need more words than that. We need like, Eskimos have a million words for cold. Like, we don't have language that I think we need to develop, which is a side tangent. But the artistry,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, look, like the AI is never going to be able to replicate the feeling you have of going to a concert and watching your favorite artists. I don't care if they're Jamie, Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo. I was walking by Madison Square Garden last night, and this band Ghost had just let out, and their fans were all makeuped out and like just got super into dressing up for the show. And I don't, so it's
And
all
not
of that
only that,
is.
watching a favorite artist respond to that energy in real time.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. That joy is not going to be felt anywhere else but in those moments. And I, I think it's a wonderful thing, but it's an increasingly, more important thing in this world.
All right, well, now you're on my list of people I'm officially asking to come up with words to describe what, like, I think it's, uh,
I don't know if I can do that Eskimo thing. That
well,
seems
you don't even
hard.
have to tell me, or definitely you don't have to do it right now, but like, I think it's important for us to think about as we move into this next space. So we have like 8 more minutes. Um, but I did want to I have one constructive criticism, and then I'm going to ask you about some anecdotes. But, um, you know, in the book, you have these anecdotes about these women whose actions and like their it's pivotal to career trajectories. Like the way that their stories unfold and their names, truly feel like you've created a nice permanent record. Their names aren't in here. Um, you you have a record label employee who even has like a whole chapter about how she drank her bosses under the table to get Spin Doctors play, who are like the Spin Doctors, and her name's not in there. And you know, I I think that when you come out with the paperback, it would just be really lovely if that name could be entered into the permanent record, whatever her name is. And then, this guy Matt Bush, who you interviewed, who becomes a who ends up working in the trade. His whole thing. I have a quote. He's like talking about how the tapers threw on God Street Wine, and he's like, the woman wrote with calligraphy, so it was hard to read her handwriting in this weird way. I eventually figured out that these were not Blues Traveler songs. This was a different band called God Street Wine. The energy leapt off the tape deck. It actually turned out to be this woman who had produced Bag for them. I think she paid for it out of her own pocket. She was friends with the band. So I started getting more music from her and then eventually started seeing them. And then he goes on to like work for them, and now he still works for Government Mule. Her name's not in there. That is
Yeah,
my official.
yeah, that's fair. And I noticed that stuff as well when I was doing it. Some people are very particular about interjecting names on the record with people not having control over that, who might not want that, who might not want that. Um,
That's fair.
that's that connection. Um, but I have been thinking about it lately, and there's there was folks that I tried to interview that didn't want to participate. Some were women. And but the by and large, like in the 80s and the 90s, like the music industry was a lot of this old boys club, right? But the women that did work in it, like the one who was Medesi Martin Wood's early manager, Liz Penta, like they had to go into a world that was not the world that we live in today, and
They
make
have,
stuff happen.
yeah, and be better and have better listening and just be able to drink better and like just be better. I mean, no, I think it's
Yeah,
fine. I love the women and we know that they're there. Because I do think what the work you're doing is important. I think this book is important. And so I just thought I'd bring Warren
no, but that's a
Haynes.
good,
That's a
yeah,
good.
that's a good thing. It's not like that's not a crazy thing to ask for. So I can bring that up to the publisher. That's not a hard thing to bring up. I'm just like weary about
I get it.
putting,
You
putting
don't have
people.
to answer now. I've brought it up. You've heard me. Thank you.
All
Um,
good.
so one of and So I love the story of how Jimmy Herring got the nickname State Line. Can you tell that anecdote, or like throw in any other anecdotes that people might, just candy that people can pass out that people might not be familiar with as we before.
Yeah, I can give you some candy. There's a story about Panic's bus in the van in the early days breaking down um on the side of the road, I think in Alabama, and an escaped convict who was a murderer had just escaped like right by them. And so they had to figure out like pretty quickly in the dark of night, like how they were going to navigate that somewhat scary situation. There is lots of good stories about the day Jerry Garcia died. That's one of my favorite chapters, and how the bands, the younger acts that were coming up, uh, reacted. There's some really like poignant and beautiful moments around how the bands dealt with fame and fallout and their rise by the end of the decade. And there's a great story or a great quote from the drummer from Blues Traveler, how he'll be walking around like in a Home Depot these days or in an elevator and hear a Muzak version of Blues Traveler's Runaround, and he's incredibly proud of that. He's incredibly proud to be a part of the fabric that was this decade. And I think that's what shines through. It was tough for people. Some people, it was, like we were talking about, it was just a lot of people figuring out things on the fly. And they did so that had a massive impact on so many people.
Well, I want to thank you so much for writing this book, for writing it and getting St. Martin's to do it in such a way that it gets out to people and that it exists, for future archival research. All the 23-year-olds today who are like obsessed with this decade,
Oh,
this music, and don't have the lived experience. And it's a great timing for it. We have 1 minute left. Are you gonna continue to tell the story of this community and take it to the next level, or what are you working on next?
yeah, I don't know what that would be. I don't know what I'm working on next. I don't know what the next level for this community would be. Um, right now I just want to like I'm very aware and going to see a lot of like the younger acts that were influenced by the 90s. Like we talked about Donato, there's a handful of others that are kind of woven into that lineage right now that are doing some really, really fantastic, great stuff. And that's like, I don't know, that's really exciting to see. It's always exciting to see uh, a new a new crop like doing their own thing, but paying homage to a past that they grew up on.
Go see Fireside Collective. That's what I'm gonna leave you with. Because look, it's one on the dot.
Great. Yeah, I'll see. Yeah, I totally will. Thank you so much for this. This was awesome. This was so fun.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll be in touch. If there's ever anything I can do for you, call me. And everyone who's watching should buy the book. It comes with a cover. This is just my copy. And you should buy it from the Country Bookshop and always hit up your independent bookstores. So thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Kim.
Kimberly, if you see me ever, I need all three syllables.
All right, I got it. Kimberly.